Okay. Thank you so. And after we write this in our mm, command line, the Angular will add two files if we are not pass any other flags to this command. It will generate a test file and the directive files itself, and also it's going to add it to the ng module declarations block. So this directive will be available in our application. That's a basic code that are going to be generated by CLI. We have a selector, the same as we have in our component decorator, and it's pretty basic. So just a second. As you might notice, we have selector is a certain little different from the selector we have in a class. The selector is wrapped into brackets. To understand why we do this, we first need to note that the selector attribute uses CSS matching rules. So as to match a component, a directive as to an HTML element, we will use just a second. We're going to use for a component. For component, we just use it as we would do for the simple tag in CSS, and when we need to select attribute or select some attribute from the CSS, we're going to use this kind of syntax. Guys, if I might skip something, if you have a question, please write. If I not elaborating the subject enough, you just please write me. And I'm a little nervous, not my first language, so. For instance, if you would like to add our directive to the class list, like here, I'm just going to paste it here. If we would need to have directive in our class list, we would write it a little differently, like this, not with brackets, square brackets, but with point, with dot, like we would do for CSS. So in our case, we want to associate our directive with a certain attribute. So when the directive gets created in Angular, we can inject an instance of something called element ref into the constructor. Did you familiar with dependency injection, or on the previous lectures might be touched a little bit? No. Okay, so when an Angular bootstrapping the application under the hood, it's inject dependencies to our classes. So for the directive, it's going to be element ref. It gives the directive direct access to the DOM element upon it's attached, so we can modify this element, and also it's inject rather two instances. This is an interface that platform independent with which we can set our properties for the elements because it might differ from different environments. For instance, we can use our application in browser, or maybe with desktop platform. Some HTML element properties can be different. For desktops, there is no inner text or inner HTML. We cannot access it with when we work with desktop platform. It was in here's tutorial. It's gonna be, I think it's gonna be in the module and services lecture, so um, maybe a little later. But I thought maybe the guy who was the lecturer is touched it a little bit. So as you can see, we I'm going to show maybe an example. So we have here it's how we use our directive as an attribute, and there is a component and so I'm gonna oh, this and highlight directive. We have just, it's very simple. We don't have any inputs or outputs. We just attach our attribute to the element, and as you can see, we used renderer, and we set style of element. We pass set style takes as an argument the element itself, so this mod card, and we also can pass properties, CSS properties, and we wanted to change the key and the value. So let's go to an example. As you can see, this card are highlighted with yellow color. Guys, maybe I don't even understand myself my explanations. Commonly, this type of directives are just used to change style. For instance, what we have. We can add class, append child, create component to manipulate this DOM element. We pass to the that are binded to this directive. So also as next example, we can use we can use such decorator as a host listener to listen to the events that are happening on our element that we attached our directive to. In this example, as you can see, we just hover over the element and it's highlighted in yellow. When we move our mouse out, it's gets back to initial color. So as you can see from this example, we have host listener. It's just a second. I have it's just as a decorator, then takes as an argument the name of the event we want to listen to, and then we use our methods that are going to fire every time this specified event is going to happen. We also have we can access the event object itself, for instance, to track coordinates or something like that, or whatever you want. And we, as you can see, we fire this function we that need to happen after this particular event. So for instance, we could have implemented this functionality on this element directly. We could have used something like hover, and depending on what is happening, or on mouse, and inside of those listeners, we could have implement this functionality in the component directly, but it might be a little bit of too much of code to write, and we should have, for instance, duplicate this functionality in different components, but with help of directive we can be more concise and encapsulate our functionality in just one directive, not chained to the particular component. Add only the events into the array. I think we can go to the API. It's just arguments, array of the arguments, and we can, for instance, pass here. Why is this? I not went so deep. Why is this in square brackets? Why is this an array? What? Why is this a public pass to the? For instance, we can pass just like, you know, event, some kind of target. For instance, event current target, and if we want to access a particular, you know, property of the event object, I think it's was made it for convenience, because, you know, if and here we can access not just, you know, event, we're just going to target. If you need to access a particular property of the event object, you know, for your convenience. So we have host binding decorator. Guys, just 1 second. Can I mute for 1 minute? I'm sorry. So we have host binding decorators. It takes one parameter, the name of the property on the host element we want to bind to. So for instance, if we want to bind to and set some particular attribute of host element, this is a host element, and so we can change this attribute of the element. For instance, we can access class attribute, or any type of attribute we want to access. So the next one is directive with we can use also input decorator to work with our directive. As you can see here, these two types of syntax we can use in this situation. We can just bind it after the, we can just bind it separately, and we can just pass it to the directive this way if we use square brackets to bind an input. So for instance, here we have our input, and every time when it changes from the host from the upper scope, we can set to our host element different color of the background. But as you can see, our directive very similar to the component and every lifecycle hook that are implemented for you used and see on the previous lecture for the component we can use for our directive. In what case this hooks fires? Maybe someone remember? Did you use this hook in your home task? Guys, did you? Okay. So this hook are fires when our input properties are changed. So every time, for this example, it's very simple. Every time when our color property have changed, the engine changes hook is going to fire. Yes, but what home task? What? I don't know. I'm not sure. You don't have a link to the task. Mm. Yes, YouTube. Just a second. Uh, is this the task, guys? I have a link to the task, but I'm not sure. Maybe it's outdated. So every time our input property have changed, the engine changes hook pairs, and we can set our background color property with the help of renderer to our host element, for instance. So is everything clear? So the attribute directive are pretty simple, and almost always they are used for manipulating style property or maybe to add some listeners to the host element. Also in Angular there is a couple of built-in attribute directives. It's an ng style directive. It lets you set given a DOM element style properties. We could use JS expression which are evaluated, and the result of the expression that are used as a value of CSS property. For instance, as we can see here, if we would like to use style just the way we would do without Angular, and with the usage of ng style, we can pass for our property, for instance, bind it to the component value. For instance, it can be a color. We can change it from our component and dynamically update is in our template. For also we can pass an object, just for instance generate it on the user preferences and just pass it theirs and so in case if our compiler is going to generate an errors, I'll delete my changes. For instance, if we have our ng style set as a standard way with background color orange, we have system style 1. So we have what's gonna happen? Just a second, please. So, for instance, we have where so as you can see, we have our style set at convenient, normal, regular way. So also we can pass a paragraph color here. So it's going to be a colored in orange as we set it in our template, and also we can just pass this object to our ng style directive, and the style of given element is going to change in order to comply with these styles. So also we have built in ng class attribute directive. It's pretty it's kind of similar to ng style. It allows us to set the CSS dynamically for DOM element when using an object literal, where the keys are the classes. For instance, we have bold, italic, red class, and the values of the key, if it's evaluated to true. So if the value is true, so class is going to be added. If no, it won't. So for this one, we have bold true and italic false and red false for the first paragraph, and we can pass the list of classes to ng class attribute is going to add those classes to our element, and also we can just use alternate syntax to set the particular class class object. We also have a non-bindable attribute directive. It's very rarely used, but just for we use this directive for the element. So it's not going to compile or bind a particular section of page. So as you can see here, it's going to be no string interpolation for this element. As you can see, it's not the string wasn't this variable wasn't interpolated. It's would have thrown an arrow if we and to throw the arrow, but it's not gonna render those brackets. But in case if we are going to add this directive, want perform an interpolation for this particular element. So so next the next directive we're going to talk about is structural directive. They are very different from those from the attribute, as they are able to change our DOM by deleting or adding elements. So, is this okay? Thank you. So we can add or delete DOM elements to DOM. For instance, this is an example of structural directive. What is in the base of working mechanism of structural directive? We have an ng template. This tag is kind of wrapper that are will never be rendered to the DOM directly. If we just write ng template and some content inside and then close this tag, nothing is going to happen. We won't see what we put inside this built-in Angular template. So this is an example. For instance, if we do this, we won't see this paragraph because it's never going to be a render. It's just going to be those comments we will be able to see in our HTML. So to be able to work with our directive, structural directive have prefix is syntax sugar. There, if we are kind of like I don't know what is the English for this. If we and look inside this directive, how is the Angular, we'll see it. It's going to be just by just a directive. We will pass to this some value, and dependent on that are wrapped into template tag, and if it's will I don't know, it will meet the Jesus Christ. Okay, let's just go to the example. Just two words are not my tools today. So we will better go. I have my. So I find my notes. So if in if it takes a boolean argument, and depending on this argument, we will show or delete element from the DOM. Uh, also, guys, just a second, please. It works kind of like this pretty simple. So if we pass false to it, it's going to hide this element. It's not going to be even rendered to the in the DOM completely. So so as you can see, we have ng if here, and if we pass false there here to this directive, it's not going to show anything. Then if we pass the true to the directive, it's going to render element always. For true C values, it's gonna no, it's pretty simple. Type for true C types is going to return true and then render the element. For object, for not empty strings, for null, for undefined, and 0 is going to hide or just delete the element from the DOM. Also in our ngIf directive, we have else. We can use else to, in case if you want to render two different pieces of template. In the case of six or our condition succeeded or not, and we can use this ng templates. It's not going to render unless the else statement is satisfied. So it's pretty can be very convenient if we don't want to write those two ng ifs, for instance, like this. True, and so we want to use two elements with ng if that are opposite. We're just going to use our ng template with an else block. So what's next? The next directive, we are going a structural directive. We are going to take a look at. It's a switch. It's pretty similar to standard switch case construction in JavaScript. So, for instance, if we have some condition, and depending on the value of particular variable, we want to render different templates. So in our example, it looks like this. Pretty simple. For instance, depending on value of emotion. Of emotion property, we want to render a particular text here. It's gonna be I'm so happy. If it would be different, for instance, if we will change it to and save it. I'm just going to render the block we want to be rendered for this particular condition. So next one, so it's a micro syntax. It can be uh, uh, shown in a different way, but I think who is want to go deep just can do it himself. Very common, often used directive in Angular. It's an ng4. It's a very convenient way for rendering we can use it to iterate through an array and render all the elements of the array. For instance, if we have as standard example class as array of heroes, and we want to render an element for every element in our array, we just would have used ng4. Also, we have micro syntaxes here. We can use index to track, for instance, some our number of the hero in our list. We can use odd property too. It might be very convenient for I don't know if we have a big table and we wanna color our rows depending on whether those are odd or not in different colors. We can use this microsyntax property. Uh, so we can use all those. We can access index first and find out whether the element first, last, even, or odd. Structural directive. We can write structural directive ourselves. Those are slightly different. We have slightly different dependencies for attribute directive. For attribute directive, we had element reference and renderer. For the implementation of structural directive, we can access template ref. It's a class that stores the reference to the template that the structural directive is referring to those that are enclosed inside ng template tag. I'm just gonna show you here. We have this one. And also we have a view container dependencies that are passed to our constructor. It's the element template is going to be placed to kind of like place in a template in which we want to embed our view. It's provided or a convenient API for manipulating the view. As you can see, we have our input. It's a condition we pass into the directive, and depending on whether or not this condition is satisfied or not, we can create the view by passing the template to this method or attaching the template to the container, or we can delete this unless directive is kind of very common example. You will find it in every structural directive tutorial. It's just opposite to the ngIf. If we pass to ngIf true is going to render the element. For this example, it's completely opposite. If we have false, passed to our unless directive is going to render element, and in case of true it's gonna delete it from the DOM. Is everything is guys is everything clear by now or nothing? Okay. So I have something else. It's maybe a little difficult to understand when someone is talking, but when you are going to implement it yourself, it's pretty. It's not complicated. Just need to do it with your bare hands to get used to syntaxes, and Angular framework are sometimes maybe a lot of new words like dependency injection, decorator, some views, containers, templates. It's a lot of kind of like horrible words that are have pretty simple meaning under the hood. Uh, so next, are we going to discuss its pipes? Pipes, it's also classes that allow us to change the data inside of template, as almost every instance in Angular, we have a pipe decorator that are how provides the metadata for this particular class. We also need to implement, I know where's we need to implement interface pipe transform to make our pipes work as Angular pipe class. It's example. As Angular wants to work like it's implements interface pipe transform with one method transform that to which we pass values. So that's how how pipe work in particular. For instance, we have let's imagine we have some kind of like date, and we wanna this date to look particular way in our template. For instance, to not just this long number, or we want to our date to look pretty human readable, like months, date, and the year. So and we want to perform this transformation in different places in our template. So we would have implement the function that takes an argument like here the date, and returns a string that are in a form we would like to see in our template, in our HTML, and without changing the original data. So in Angular we have pipes. For instance, this data string interpolation, we pass some our variable here, property from our DOM, or maybe some element from the ng4, and then we use this sign to tell the Angular that we want to use the pipe here, and then the name of the pipe. To those pipe we can pass an arguments. For instance, for this particular pipe we pass a string that are helps pipe to decide in what kind of format we want our string to be rendered on our page. So as everything in Angular, we can use Angular CLI to generate the pipe. After writing this command and executing, we will have our pipe file added to our folder, to our structure of the project, and with pipe, the pipe file itself is gonna contain pipe decorator with the name of our newly created pipe, and also pipe class that, as I was saying, implements pipe transform interface. So Angular can work with our class via transform method. Also, we have to add our pipe to the declaration to ng module for our class to be available in our application. By default, it's added to the app module, but I think you can change it by writing some certain flags in Angular CLI commands. So this is the standard syntax of the pipe. So we have our values that are needs to be not changed, but uh, rendered differently from the original value. Here we have pipe names and also parameters we want to send to this pipe. Also, one of the nice features of pipes that those are have the transform methods takes in the value and returns the value, so we can chain those pipe. For instance, we have string Angular here, we can use built-in pipe slice. So we're going to take a look at built-in pipe in a couple of minutes, and then we can use uppercase pipes that are changes our string to just uppercase letters, and from the string Angular we're going to have this input in our template in our view. So also there might be cases when we not only going to use our pipes in template, it can be also used inside the class itself. For instance, pipe can take I don't know, an array, and have some perform some alternation with this array and this then without changing the original one, maybe, and then the return value can be, like in this example, assigned anywhere or just so. It's not in general, it's not it can be used not only in template but also for manipulating that data inside the class. The syntax is going to be slightly different and we need to provide it to our component, but in general the purpose of the uh, pipe is stays the same. So here we have our pipes. There's a lot of pipes built in that you can use for your application in Angular itself. Angular developers, just good guys. So for instance, date pipe is a very popular one, and we can uh, there is a different format that are just in form of a string. For instance, it's date. It just month, day, and here every description of every of those how is it called, every of those date formats that are described here you can find in the documentation. Date. There's how is this shortcut is going to be taken by Angular, for instance. Medium is like there. Just no, I don't think we should so pay a lot of attention for this example because it's similar. If you want to use, you're just going to the documentation. Also, we can it might be more convenient for you. For instance, you just can pass the format custom as you wanted to see, and this we can also see the meaning of those abbreviation. For instance, if you pass small y to as a for here was going to have those digits just simple. If you have two, we're just going to render the last two digits and so on. For this is an example of a custom format. So Angular also have a decimal pipe. It helps to work with floats. We pass how many numbers we want to see after the point, and the Angular is going to render our number in the format we want to. So yes. What do you mean in your custom functions? For instance, for some helpers or? Yes, you can. I haven't saw how we can pass the way we can use built-in pipes in the custom in the component code in the class. So, but if we have if we create the custom pipe, of course, as I was mentioned before, we can use this pipe in our class. When it comes to Jesus, when it comes to built-in pipes, just a second. I think when it comes to built-in pipes, yes, I don't think you can use it in a component. You mean in component? It means here, right? In a test file. Built-in, I haven't solved this in production code, but it's the built-in ones are usually used in templates. Our custom, yes, we can use in code, for instance, if we need to manipulate data. How we would have access? How? I don't know. Maybe Angular provides an interface to manipulate our building pipes in code in class. I don't see the information. So okay. The thing about pipe, especially those pipes, they do not change the original data. They just change the way it's rendered to the view. The date stays the same. It's not gonna change. It's the why those are used. The one of the main purposes, if we don't want to change something and we want to just have our template in a particular condition. So custom pipe. So also we have slice pipe. It works similar to the slice array method or slice for strings. We have, for instance, in this example, we have Angular and it's going to cut our string from the third position to and to six and render this string. We also can slice our arrays if you want to. Interesting. To render those. So also we have currency pipe that are the currency assigned to our number, for instance, or whatever we want. And the percent pipe is set at percentage and how much numbers we want to be rendered after decimal point. Upper and lowercase pipes that are going to transform our string to upper or lowercase. It's straightforward. What else I would like to say? In this example, there is an async pipe. For it's very might not be obvious now because you haven't touched observables by now, but it's very commonly used when we are fetching something, for instance, from the server, some list of, I don't know, names, and it's my I'm just going to look at example. Angular uses asterisk.js to manage asynchronous data. Are you guys familiar with asterisk.js observables? So it's not very in the scope of the scope of the lecture to talk about observables and so on, but in a nutshell, observables are work we have to subscribe. Yes, you will. So I know you have to subscribe to the observable to get for the observables to execute and don't want to kind of like make you confused with my explanation because it's a pretty big subject, so I'm gonna to comment for myself. So when it's going to be a RxJS lecture, we are going to talk about async pipe. It's very convenient thing to use when you need to fetch something or render the uh, observable result. So also I would like to, I don't know why it's not here, but there is a JSON pipe. It's not used for production, but it may be very useful for debugging. For instance, here we're going to just a second. Tag pipes. If we have kind of like public um, and we have object, and for instance we want to render this object with string interpolation, just a single pipe. What we're gonna have here, it's just rendered as object, and if, for instance, you wanna to be sure what exact object you are passing to the template, you can use JSON pipe for debugging, and it will help our object to be translated to this view, so you can see what's what. I don't know. Just for debugging, not for production. It might be convenient in some cases. So also I would like to talk about pure and impure pipe and why would we use one. For instance, the pipe functionality we could have implement very kind of like differently. For instance, if we want our pipe example, and I'm gonna to create mm, mm, what kind of and we would like for some values, just I implemented this kind of functionality recently in some on my project, but I would like to set a good example. For instance, we can for formatting we can not use a pipe. We just can for instance have some kind of like method that are going to be fired every time we want to. How can I? Okay, I'm not going to invent something. I should have be prepared, but I wasn't. So what is one of the I don't know, pluses, cons of the using pipe, that if we are using standard pipe like we implemented here with like this, just with nothing is passed here with besides this our computation, if we have some kind of like if we want to go through some array, for instance, like over here, yes, we have to perform some changes, some iterations through the array with filter every time. our input is changed. So it's not going to fire every time. For instance, some event is happening. It's just going to perform those iterations when the input is changed. For array, it's when the link change. For instance, if you're going to push some elements to the array, the transform method is not going to fire unless the link itself is going to change. If we have passed pure property set to false to our pipe, so our transform is going to be fired every time change detection and Angular are performed. For I'm not sure that change detection lecture is included into your course, but change detection is fires after, for instance, a synchronous event is, and for when event listeners are fired, and when some timers are finished. So every time when some asynchronous action is ended, Angular is perform change detection. It's very difficult changing functions that are compares state of the Angular components and re-render it if it's needed. So for for pure pipes, the change detection, uh, comparison between the state of the pipe previous and current is going to happen only when our primitive value is changed or the link change. When we set pure to false, it's going to fire very often. It can affect the performance of our application. If you want to use impure pipe, you should take know the responsibility you're taking with this decision, and that it can really affect the performance of your application. So is this clear? I kind of like feel like it's not really clear. No. Yes. First, pure change executes a pure pipe. Okay, let's see. Custom pipe. Now I will try to show. So custom. So, custom pipe. Yes, it's please pipe. So console log. So if you take a look, we have custom pipe. Where is, yes, it's here. So we have our, just a second. So custom pipe, please. Task example, please set it. Uh, here. For instance, if we are not just use our, simple string here, if we would use here public my string equals to some string, and we would change this string every time we click the buttons. For the button, for instance, we are going to add some button here. we'll add an event listeners that are going to fire every time we click this button. And for instance here, uh, uh, um, no. So every time we are going to change, let's consider my string, some string variable. We're gonna to delete this, and now how the pipes work. We have my string. This string are by we are bind it to our template, and every time we fire this we change our string, it's going to add please in to the string. For instance, we click, the string is going to change. So every time when the transform method is firing, so we perform some changes. We transform our input for this pipe. It's a pure pipe. It's going to fire transform method only when the input change. In this case, input in this string. Console. It's not firing this pipe. So why is this not working the way I would like it to work? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. As you can see, impure pipe, we have impure pipe that are implemented for changing our array. Impure pipe, why is this? Just a second. Jesus. So as you can see, we have pure pipe. We use ng4 and we use is done impure to change to transform for the for the view our our array. So is done impure. It's what this pipe is doing. It filters the list of tasks, whether this task is done or not. So if we are going to comment out this piece of code, so five user messages, so we can use pure pipe is logged only one time because just impure. Every time the transform method for the pure pipe is fired, we're going to have our pure pipe console log was fired only once because the only once our list of tasks it was rendered. So now we if we uncomment our in PurePipe from the template, you're gonna see how often is going to console log transform method. So as you saw, when we use PurePipe, the transform method was fired only once when we have the array rendered very first time. If the array would have changed, for instance, we would add some if we would change the array, if we would add some element to the array, it wouldn't fire because we wouldn't change the link. But if we pass to our pipe completely different array, it would render it again. For impure pipe, those transform methods are fired every time something is happening on our page, for instance, on a mouse hover or some clicks. So it's, as you can see, it's the app is running only for, I don't know, 30 or seconds or 1 minute, and how often this method is going to be invoked. So if you will implement a couple of those impure pipes in a different components, it might affect the performance of the application heavily, because as you can see how many console log is here, and every time it's logged, it's just a message of the pipe is fired. It's better, not really. Yes, is this? Uh, so maybe you have some questions. It's for this for this lecture is gonna be it's almost we covered almost everything. It's not a difficult subject. I will share the presentation with you. Do you need one? Maybe you have some questions, guys. I can also, I think, maybe you need examples, or Andrei was share it with you on the previous lecture. This set of examples, you might want to, go through this and see some examples. I'll share it with you. Come, if someone will need. I just okay. I'll yes, sure, for pipes. Okay, I'm going to. It's hidden. Couple of minutes. I'm going to copy this link into this chat. Guys, I would like to ask: did you start your homework or not? Not. Maybe. Did you study React before Angular? Angular material. What's you like the most, Angular so far or React? React, of course, React. And React is way more popular than Angular. Yes, you cannot. You know, Angular is more kind of a framework, but for some purposes, you will. It's kind of maybe difficult to learn, but it's bigger in general, but it has a lot of functionalities that are just out of the box, and it might make the life of a developer way easier than sometimes working with React, because for instance later you might enjoy RxJS. It's very interesting way to manage data, and especially asynchronous data. So no, it might be pretty interesting. Okay, so I won't be holding you. Schedule and the task with links and deadlines. I think I share a link now. Deadlines. I'm not sure about deadlines, but I can share links to link to task itself. Just a second, please, guys. I'm going to find. So just a minute. Just a minute. So this is an examples from those lectures, so you can touch it or play with it. So on the tasks, I'm not sure about deadlines. OS mentors to showing to next task and a little better receive nothing. Tasks are here. I am not familiar with your deadlines, so I can ask the management to take some action regarding this question. Okay, I'm gonna write. They are not in the app spreadsheet. Are you sure? Are you sure? I thought I saw this. Deadlines not less. It's just schedule of the lectures. There's no deadlines. I'm not sure, but I think you can start for I haven't saw after the lecture, it's not a very big task, so you can just go with the lectures if you have time. I'm gonna write to our one of the managers, and I'm sure they have no problems to send the deadlines, or maybe it's not going to be here. Who is going to look over your tasks? Your mentors, right? No, we don't know, maybe. Okay, guys, so we don't have many information. Are you not sure who's going to check over your homework? Okay, I'm gonna write to girl, and I'll ask Andrei maybe on the next lecture he will tell you what's what. Okay, so have a nice night, guys. Bye. Thank you for being here.